Today I want to show you how to make these amazing AIP or Autoimmune Paleo friendly flatbreads that you can use for sandwiches or just to eat as like a bread with a curry or a soup. I'm so excited to share this recipe with you guys. So I've been making Ashley from My Heart Beats Paleo Naan for years now, and it's a 3-ingredient naan: almond flour, tapioca flour, and salt, and you mix it all together and you put it in a pan and it makes this amazing naan that is gluten-free and paleo and goes so well with like Indian foods and curries and all these kind of things. And I wondered if I replaced the almond flour with an AIP friendly flour, if it would work, and sure enough, it does. So yes, the main bulk of this recipe is from My Heart Beats, and I want to give credit for her because credit is definitely due there. And if you are not on AIP, or if you can reintroduce nuts into your diet, definitely try out her recipe. Just Google Paleo Naan and you'll find it. But for those of you that are on AIP or can't have nuts, then this alternative is a great way to go about it. And it makes a great flatbread, so you can either have it for sandwiches, or you can do it for like sides to soups or curries or anything like that as well. Now I had to play around with the amounts a little based on Ashley's recipe because they didn't quite work out one-to-one. So they're a little bit different if you were to look at her recipe versus mine. But the things that you're gonna need are 1 can of coconut milk. And again, if you're on AIP, you wanna have a coconut milk that does not have guar gum in it. So you can either make your own, or the brand I really like is the Native Forest Simple Coconut Milk. No guar gum inside that. There are other brands as well. You can also use 1.5 cups or so of homemade tigernut milk. I will link to a recipe that I think is good below on how to make that for yourself. Tiger nuts, if you're not familiar with it, are not actually nuts, they're tubers, so they are AIP compliant and good for a nut allergy or something like that. You're also gonna need some cassava flour or tigernut flour. I'm gonna show you when I make these a little bit different texture that they come out with. I feel like the cassava flour ones come out a little thicker and more closer to like naan or like a pita bread, whereas the tigernut flour comes out more like a crepe. It's still thicker than a crepe, and you can make them thinner, but it's still thicker, and it rolls a little bit better, but it's a little bit sweeter than the cassava flour. So it's really kind of up to you. If you don't like the taste of cassava flour, use tigernut flour. If you really just want to experiment with both, try both. And then you're gonna need tapioca flour or arrowroot flour. Either one's fine. They kind of work interchangeably in this recipe. And then sea salt. And then finally, one of the helpful things to have is a small crepe pan like this. I think this is like 8 inches. You can do larger pans, but you will know that the recipe that I'm gonna give you makes about 4 to 5 flatbreads in this size pan. So if you make it in a larger pan, you're gonna make less. And you may have to cut your flatbreads in half to make them kind of manageable. But it can be done in a larger pan as well. We've done both. And then the steps for this are pretty easy. The first thing you're gonna wanna do is to get your pan preheating on the stove, just so it is at like a nice warm temperature by the time you have the batter mixed together. The batter really takes no time whatsoever to mix together, so it's a good idea to get that started first. And then all you're gonna have to do is just mix everything together. So let me show you how easy that is. Just literally dump, whisk, and pour into the pan. Okay, first is 3/4 cup of cassava flour, and then 3/4 cup of tapioca or arrowroot starch, a pinch of sea salt, and then 1 can of coconut milk or 1.5 cups of homemade tigernut milk. I'm gonna whisk it all together. And then see how it's kind of like runny? You want it to be like this. You don't want it to be really thick. It wants to be pretty runny, but experiment if you need to like try to get it to this point. If you're using tigernut milk, for example, it may be a little bit runnier. And so you'll just want to just make sure it gets to this point. I gotta state, I've got like a love-hate relationship with tapioca flour because it's like, gets everywhere. I swear, I think like the moms at school probably think I'm doing coke or something because I'm always covered in a white powder when I'm doing cooking during the day. Ugh. When you're ready to cook, you're gonna just pour some of the batter into the pan. You wanna cover the bottom of the pan and then make it a little bit thicker. These are not crepes, so you want them a little bit thicker than that. And then you're gonna set the timer for 4 minutes at first. As you continue to cook these, the pan's gonna get warmer, so you'll probably have to adjust both the heat maybe down a little bit as well as the time per side. So you're gonna start off around 4 minutes per side, and then you'll probably get down to like 3 minutes per side. And even maybe on the last one, maybe 2 minutes. If you have brown pieces on the sides, that's fine. It's kind of expected to have those. It gives that character and kind of a good taste, especially if you're making it into like naan. However, you don't want it burnt or anything like that. So just kind of watch them as you go towards, like as you're cooking them, to make sure that they're not gonna kind of overcook. And then once the first side is done, you just simply flip it over and then cook it on the other side for 3 to 4 minutes. And then when the bread's done, I like to put it on a wire baking rack just because it gets airflow all around it and doesn't kind of make it mushy. You can put it on a plate, but don't stack them just yet. Just wait until they completely cool before you stack them. You'll also notice that they tend to be a little bit stiffer when they're still kind of warm, and then as they cool, they get more bendable and pliable. So if you want to use this as a sandwich wrap, wait until they've completely cooled. Otherwise, if you're just gonna eat them as like a side to a soup or curry, then go ahead and eat them right now. You'll also notice that one side tends to look like this with the brown marks all over it. And then the other side tends to look like this, a little bit more of a crinkly appearance. Do not worry about that at all. And to give a hint with the tigernut flour, if I put that in there, I like to kind of break it up with my hands because it tends to be a lot lumpier than most flours, and you want to make sure that those lumps are all broken up. So I just put in the dry ingredients first and then kind of just break it all up with my hand first. These breads also freeze beautifully. So I like to make a whole bunch in one session, freeze a lot, so that I can just take them out whenever I need them. Next week, I'm gonna show you how to make a gyro sandwich using these wraps. And I love to make the gyro meat and then freeze slices of that because that cooks up really quickly from frozen. And then also frozen flatbreads, so that way I can make up a gyro sandwich so quickly and it's delicious, and it's just something that like will keep you healthy but not like take up a whole bunch of time. The process of freezing is really simple. All I do is just take a piece of bread and then I put parchment over it, and then I put another piece of bread and parchment over that, and just keep layering it. The parchment in between keeps them separated, so that way you can just take out one at a time and you don't have to worry about them being stuck together, which is really nice. And then I just put them into a plastic bag into the freezer and then label it, and then I just have them there whenever I need it. To thaw them, it's just really simple. You can either thaw like on the countertop or in your fridge for a couple of hours, or you can put it in your microwave if you want for like 10 to 15 seconds, or you can put it onto a pan on the stove and just kind of heat it up there, or even in the oven for a few minutes. Let me just quickly show you the difference too between the, this is the cassava flour one and the tigernut one. You can tell the tigernut one maybe is a little bit like darker in color. That's due to the tigernut flour. And this one looks more like a traditional white flour kind of recipe. This one doesn't brown up like the spots as well as the cassava flour one does, but it doesn't matter, it's still the same thing. And it bends just as easily as the cassava flour one. So they're both great. It just kind of depends on which one you'd rather have. If you don't like cassava flour, obviously you're going to go with tigernut flour, but this one's also a little bit sweeter. I tend to like the cassava flour one better for something like a gyro or a very savory sandwich. If you're going to do something that's a little bit more on the sweet side, then maybe you do the tigernut flour. And that's it for the flatbreads. I mean, they're awesome because A, they taste great, but they're also really great meal prep items because you can freeze them and keep them for a long time. Take them out whenever you need them. They make delicious sandwiches. They make delicious accompaniments to soup, so you can have them for breakfast or dinner or whatever. I mean, it's just, it kind of opens up the door to a whole bunch of stuff. So I really like things like this, especially if you're like me and you do like kind of bready things. I wouldn't recommend them having every day because it still is like cassava flour and tapioca flour. Like, you don't need that much starch in your life, but as something that will help you to maintain your sanity and want to continue to do something like autoimmune paleo, these things are awesome. And then like I said, next week I'm gonna show you how to make some autoimmune paleo friendly gyro wraps. And if you haven't already gotten into my paleo freebie library, I'll link to it below where you can get the password. And inside there's all kinds of resources on how to do paleo and AIP and just all kinds of stuff like that will help you like freeze your meal plans and things. So I will link to that below. And otherwise I will see you next week.